most of the time, unless I really don't need a good grade on it. Usually grades, but if I did really badly on a test before and I want to prove that I can do better, then I'll try really hard on the next one too.
Not always, but I'm a pretty good test taker, so usually they do.
Kind of.
Okay.
It's not like a guarantee, but usually.
So there's always a question when you're giving tests. Let's say a test to college students in the computer lab. Are they doing their best? Do they really perform at maximum capacity? Or are they perhaps goofing off? Are they looking at the clock? Some of these questions came to our minds as we were delivering tests to large classrooms of foreign language students at Michigan State. And some of those questions spurred this study.
What led you to do this study, and why do you think that that's important?
Well, about 4 years ago, Michigan State University received funding from the flagship program as part of the Department of Defense. We were asked to investigate proficiency in our foreign language programs. So what we did in our grant program was to administer ACTFL-based proficiency tests to students in Chinese, French, Russian, and Spanish in 3 skills: in reading, speaking, and listening. And we gave these tests to students who were in first year, second year, third, and fourth year of language studies. Most important for our purposes was that for many of the students, there was no tangible outcome other than, of course, their ACTFL score. But nothing in their final grade depended on the outcome. So we decided to see if some sort of incentivization would help students attain their best possible score.
Who were involved in this study?
Well, we limited ourselves to second year Spanish studies, and we had 3 groups of students. One with no incentivization and at all, and 2 with variable grading incentives. Each of these groups had about 80 students in them. One group received 5% of their grade based on pre-established proficiency levels, and the other group received 10% of their grade based on the same pre-established proficiency levels.
Can you tell me the relationship between the observed scores and the true scores?
Sure. Well, whenever anyone takes a test, the score that the student gets is just an estimation. It's possible, theoretically, if a student were to take a test again and again and again with maybe a severe case of amnesia in between, that their score would vary a little bit each time they took it. And that variation is normal, and it has something to do with the reliability of the test and also the consistency of the test taker. Maybe you're a little more tired one day, or maybe you didn't have a good breakfast, or maybe one day you were feeling your best and you did really well. So that theoretical difference in observed scores is normal, and it has to do with how well the test situation and the test taker performs at the time of testing. And what we say is that range of scores that are normally possible on a given test is called the true score or the true score range. And what we hope is that with adequate preparation that's ethical, like get enough sleep, do your best on the test, make sure students understand the directions, you can maximize their observed score. So it's at the upper end of that true score range. And that's something that this paper is about.
What are the specific research questions you investigate in this study?
Okay, so we have 2 big research questions. On the one hand is looking at how do these variable grading incentives impact the language performance on these tests, on the speaking, on the reading, and on the listening tests. The second one is we wanted to see whether there was a difference between males and females. So what is there a gender difference? And do these incentives impact gender, females or males, in a different way?
And what did you find in this study?
What we found was that the 10% group outperformed the control group on all 3 skills, for all 3 skills. The experiment group with the 10% condition scored borderline significantly better than the 5% condition. But that only was true for speaking. And finally, what we found was that the 5% condition outperformed the control group for reading. Okay, with respect to research question 2, the question about whether any gender differences, we found a kind of like a more interesting picture, is that basically between males and females we didn't find many differences except for the 10% condition. In the 10% conditions, the females outperformed the males. When we look in more detail on how the females performed on the test and the males performed on the test, we found that the different conditions affected the females differently, whereas the males, basically, it didn't matter in what condition they took the test.
What implications does this study provide for language programs?
The implications for this are really thought-provoking. From a testing perspective, what it seems to suggest is that when universities or college programs give proficiency tests, like the ACTFL assessments, comparing one group to another group might only be possible if the incentivization levels and types of incentivization are kept constant across the different groups. So if you want to compare one university's performance to another, we wouldn't recommend that because universities are so different. But you have to take into consideration that there are probably differences in the type of incentivization that the programs have attached to the tests. And I think we also have to know that we need to know more about this standard error of measurement, the true score versus observed scores, and that in a testing situation, people might perform differently depending on the incentivization level. And that's important for interpreting scores and what the scores mean.
So if you have some questions, please feel free to contact us at MSU.
Yeah, let us know if you have any questions about the methodology or the results. We'd be happy to discuss over email or talk to you on the phone.